So, Jared, you didn't have him on the previous podcast. You've never had him.
I was never on the Jared Longshore channel.
Wow.
The Reformation Revival, and that's why I forced myself onto this one.
Yeah. Well, come to find out, it's the same channel.
Come to find out, it's a new channel.
It's the same channel.
It's a new experience.
It's a new name.
Yeah,
It's the Jared. It's the Jared.
colors and
It's got the same engine.
Yeah.
Well,
Just put
no.
a nice color coding on it.
A
Right.
second engine, I guess.
Well, no. I would just it's one that happens every week instead of
Right. And we still like Reformation, Pro Reformation, I assume.
Pro Revival.
I assume.
I mean, you can't have to write stuff about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It changed your basic.
I don't know about a second engine. I think that might be it.
Oh, okay.
A second engine.
Okay. I want to see how you guys. Yeah.
Like a,
Same.
Well,
same
how would you
engine.
describe it then?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very
I'm
curious.
thinking like two brains, but is it? Are you guys two cars that have to hold hands? Anymore?
it's like a motorcycle.
How long have we been recording?
Jake's
Okay, so we'll just start.
We'll just
Welcome
roll.
to the right stuff. What were you doing?
So what was this? This is a motorcycle and sidecar.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Who's in the motorcycle and who's in the car?
We'll put a little.
Depends
steering
on
wheel
which
the
way you're
sidecar.
going to play. Right. I mean, I'm definitely a sidecar situation.
Okay.
You
No,
drive.
I mean, yeah.
And me, I'm chasing you guys. I guess.
I don't actually know at that point. I'm in the sidecar, but I got a bazooka. You know what I mean?
We'll just include all of that because that was good for the show.
Absolutely.
I felt like it
I think
was
so.
identity, like
Don't do that. Don't
show identity.
don't be that guy.
You don't want to
Behind
include
the
any of
scenes
that.
secret text. You know.
All right, I can start over.
I'm just
I'll give producer Elliot the intro he really wants. No.
He wants a definite start point.
And an end point. I get notes.
Oh,
That's good to know.
No, it's good. It's good. That's why he's here. Wade Stotts, welcome to the right stuff.
It's so good to be here, guys.
We're very glad to have you.
a
Jared,
privilege.
thanks for coming
very
today.
glad to have you. Wade Show backstage.
I don't know
right.
What this is.
Jared continues to rename the show. It's
This is the
like
Wade
it's
Show
gonna be-
backstage. This is what this is.
It sounds like audience questions are going to be involved, where it's like,
Oh, that would
be
"Remember when
actually
you said
great.
this?"
producer Elliot's going to send in live audience questions. I
We
think.
should start
hey.
with the. We should start with the people. There's a little chatter every now and then about us being lookalikes,
Oh yeah, okay,
which is very interesting. You know.
yeah. Couple of
That is an
Venmo-
interesting
yeah.
Venn diagram because I'd wonder. I know that Wade gets this a lot and he loves it. He gets a lot of Matt Walsh.
The Matt Walsh
Do
comparison.
you
yeah.
get a lot of Matt Walsh?
No.
Okay,
No.
so that's the Venn diagram. Is like
Yeah.
there's
Okay.
a little bit of overlap, but
we
not
look
enough.
like each other, but we both don't look like Matt Walsh. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. With me, it's more like The Rock. You know what I mean? A lot of comparisons.
Yeah.
To,
No, that makes
a lot
sense.
of comparisons.
There we go. It's all the tats.
So, look
You
how hard
guys
he's
haven't seen the
laughing at
tats. The audience hasn't seen shit.
Wade Stotts comes on, he starts telling jokes. You should have heard him yesterday. He saw Chocolate Knox, and you should have. The way he talked was
different
very
guy.
different.
Very
Yes.
different guy.
Yeah.
But yes, we do look alike. I've heard that before. We were making a thumbnail. I made a thumbnail for our Wadecast episode, and I was like, we look very similar, and so I just called the episode like "Heartwarming: Two Brothers Reunite After like Long Lost Brothers Reunite."
Like,
I do feel bad. I should have texted out everybody wear a flannel today
Oh yeah,
to match Wade, but you
Right.
didn't wear a flannel.
I went for merch.
Company man.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
the right stuff. Canon Press. Subscribe.
Wade 99.
Wade 99.
Use Wade 99.
You
to
guys need a
subscribe.
promo code. You guys need a promo code. That's where the energy is.
Wade, there was an interview back in the Cannon Calls days
Mhm.
where I felt like I introduced Wade to like the 800 people who
Mhm.
were Cannon Calls diehards.
Mhm.
Where did you come from? If people don't know,
Yeah.
how did you get here?
Well, literally, I came from Arkansas. I was born in Arkansas.
Out of the
I grew up
ashes.
there. Yeah. So I guess we all grew up in the South. So we got a
Yeah.
table full of Southerners here.
Right.
But yeah, like what do you mean? Like where did I come from? Like immediately before this, if people aren't aware, I was at the Steven Crowder show. I was
Okay.
there for 2 years, 2019, 2020. Very fun time to be involved in news media.
Yeah. Well, especially there.
Yeah, it was a big year for that show, and like being able to be. There was a time where I realized I was one of the only like people writing sketches about some of these stories, because it's like some of the left can't make fun of certain things, and so it was like I guess I get to be the guy who writes a sketch about some event.
The right can, and the right is Wade Stotts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there weren't a lot of sketch shows.
Right.
So it was like, all right, we had to fill time. And I just found myself like in BLM protest world writing writing sketches about that. Which
Jared,
is
are you familiar at all with the Crowder Show?
Vaguely. I mean, I've heard that name before.
Yeah.
I've not watched him, but I understand he's a big deal, or was a big deal, or something like that. But the I mean, I'm immediately interested in sketch. You say I'm sketches, so use that word. Interesting.
Yeah.
How do you walk me through that process? Like you think, well, this is an interesting cultural moment, or this is an interesting story. How long is a sketch? What makes a good sketch?
Yeah.
Give me the right stuff sketch.
That's interesting. Yeah. Like I was talking yesterday about the JFK files got released. So this will be released later, but recently for us, the JFK files got released. And I tweeted something about like there was a spot in there where they said like a clique of CIA agents. There was somebody said that a clique of CIA agents committed the shooting or whatever, and I was like, cliques are the worst, like what do I? So that's and then underneath that I was like, imagine the guy who was trying to join the assassination clique, and he's like on the outside, but like, hey guys, what you doing over there? Just like, and I started describing that tweet to my wife, and she's like, that's a great sketch, you should do that sketch. But I think I don't know what the magic of that is, but it's just like imagining a situation or like a turn and just a little unexpected take on it. So I think that part of it is just also like having watched a lot of sketch comedy, you just kind of know, oh, that sounds like that. So I'm sure that like songwriters are the same way, where they go like, oh, that sounds like, they say a phrase and they're like, that sounds like a song lyric. And so, yeah, sketch comedy is an interesting thing. I just watched so much Saturday Night Live growing up. But yeah, there was a time where like Netflix or Hulu or something had it where you could watch all of them. And I would just work through. I got all the way to like season 15 or something, and I watched every episode. So that's the sketch format is familiar to me. So I've been able to see a bunch of stuff that like works and stuff that doesn't work. And then there's another step after that that's like, okay, now you do it, and you can be able to tell, like, try to meet your own standards for what works.
Can you give me like sketching 101 though? Like what's the sketch format? Just like,
let's see. What's a Saturday Night Live sketch that you guys like?
Go for it.
I mean, I know I've seen these. The cowbell sketch.
Guess what? I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell.
That's famous,
okay.
Right? Isn't that famous one? Cowbell?
Yeah.
More cowbell?
Yeah. Let's see where to go in from that. So like one rule on Saturday Night Live is that you can't get to the premise until the top of page 2. So what that means is that you have to give the audience time to kind of get used to the normal world of the sketch, and then
per page, that's about 1 minute.
About a minute. So about a minute of screen time. So if you go through most Saturday Night Live sketches that you watch on YouTube, at about minute 2, like at about a minute, it like you go, oh, that's what this sketch is. So and that always gives you a turn, gives you a sense of like, if you were to start a movie at the beginning of Act 2, it would be bad news. You'd be like, oh, okay, I guess these people are together. Like at a rom-com, you're like, I guess
theme stated comes way earlier.
Yeah, theme stated, and also like show in a rom-com, show the guy in his life, show the girl in her life, and then they meet right at Act 2. So like if the movie starts with them meeting, that's a problem. And like if a sketch starts with crazy guy walks into a meeting, then that's a problem. Or like crazy guy starts playing the cowbell, then you're just lost. So that one starts out is actually another example of a long intro is one of the first Matt Foley sketches. So the like motivational speaker, the Chris Farley jumping through the table, that's one, I think the premise of like Chris Farley walks in at like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So there's a bunch of like lead in. So then this guy, so that the comedy has a chance to come in. So the challenge is always to make it interesting and entertaining for that first minute, and then drop the premise in. So typically a Saturday Night Live sketch will be like 4 to 6 minutes. And so that just gives them plenty of time to play after that. So it's like normal, it's like Act 1 basically, and then premise. And then from after you introduce premise, it's escalation from there. So you just get to play and make sure that you end. And then by the end, you have a button So some kind of the worst Saturday Night Live sketches kind of fizzle. So if you watch a lot of the recent ones, then you'll just kind of, if it's a game show sketch, they'll end with somebody going like, all right, that's all the time we have on this, for this week. We'll see you next week. And you go, that sketch kind of fizzled. And then once in a while they'll do, well, that's all we have time for this week. Join us next week and there's a joke at the end. You go, that sketch just ended. So that's all like structural stuff. But
yeah, that's fascinating.
As it's an answer to the like, okay, you have an idea for a sketch. You can typically plug it into that.
Could you break that down? Does that work with Buried Alive in a Box? That is my favorite. I don't know if that's SNL.
Buried Alive in a Box. I don't think I know that one.
Buried Alive in a Box.
No.
You don't know this either?
No.
The counseling situation. What's the guy's name? He's like famous. I should know his name.
Oh, I don't know.
She comes in for counseling.
Yeah.
You haven't seen this?
No, I haven't seen this.
I guess it's like a pastor thing. Like pastors
Okay.
love this one, dude.
Okay.
I mean, I'll be horrible at telling it, but basically the gal comes for counseling, and very famous comedian guy is the counselor, and he says, or it's therapy or whatever. And he says, it's, I don't know, $25 and then $5 for every minute. Mm-hmm. And I don't do refunds, And so she says, I have this recurring dream that I'm getting buried alive in a box. Just makes me feel terrible, And he listens to her and he just goes, stop it.
Okay.
And it's just again, stop it. She goes, it goes on for like 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And she, but I can't. It's hard. He's like, okay, so stop it. Mm-hmm. And then the kickoff at the very end, like after he's gone on and on, she's like, I wanted to quit. I don't like this. He's like, great. I don't do refunds. And she's like, well, then I want to take up my next 3 minutes. Yeah. And then at the very end, he's like, okay, I'll give you more words. Stop it or I'll bury you alive in a box.
Okay.
There you go.
That's great.
So there you have the end. Yeah.
Is there
escalation in the end?
Is there a sketch that Jared could go find? So you've talked about the SNL stuff, but is there one that he could find that you did write?
I mean, the one people know of is the Polite Racist. I did that one when I was there. And it was like a dinner party sketch, which SNL has 100 of those an episode.
Yes.
But yeah, dinner party sketch. And it starts out where people are just kind of riffing, talking about how good the chicken is. And then somebody quotes a Chris Rock bit and they go like, and then turns to and says like, you haven't seen that Chris Rock bit? Oh, I can't believe it. And then he says, no, yeah, well, I haven't seen that. I'm like, what about like Dave Chappelle? You like Dave Chappelle? I'm like, no, not really. And I'm like, why not? You're such a comedy fan. That's weird. And he says, well, I am a racist, so I just don't watch those guys. Yeah. And that's the reveal. And then from there, it's just like this guy totally drilling down and committing, and everybody else just like responding and reacting. And then button at the end of that one. But
yes,
and by the end, it's like the conversation has gotten to like a heated point, and then like everybody calms down and says like, all right, it's time to calm down. And then I try to start the conversation. I'm the racist guy in the sketch. So, and I try to restart the conversation and go like, anybody see the new Oceans movie? Ocean's 8, I think it is. And they're like, and I was like, I liked it. I think it was great. And they're like, you did? I was like, well, I'm not a sexist. So like, yeah, you got setup, premise, escalation, button. I'm trying to think of another example of what would be a good one. But like if somebody were to try to write that, JFK sketch.
Yes.
So somebody goes, all right, well, it's a guy trying to get into there. Okay, that's the sketch idea.
There's a clique he wants to get into. It turns out they're the JFK.
They're the JFK ones. So you can start that from two different directions, right? You can start the sketch with him and go like, or he's just feeling alone at work, and then he is trying to get into stuff, and then he stumbles on one, and that's the one that's planning the JFK assassination. Or you could start with the clique and they're planning the JFK assassination. You try to make that entertaining for a little while, and then a guy kind of moseys up and tries to get involved, and then from there it's just the escalation's clear there, so it's just more desperate attempts for him to get into the clique.
Butting into a clique.
Yes. It has to get more cartoonish. He has to like get over it, and then whatever the button is has to be distinctly JFK and distinctly clique, and it has to kind of wrap it up and make it feel like it ended. So
what makes a good first page?
That's a tough question, because Saturday Night Live, if you've watched any Saturday Night Live sketches, you can watch it done really well and really poorly. Typically, it gives you enough of this is the world we're in, and then after that, try to be interesting, make sure the audience is still listening. So like another example, I just watched a sketch recently from a few years ago where it's a pre-tape about a heist. So heist sketch, these guys are sneaking in. They're going to steal this rich man's like vintage car, really nice car. They're going to steal it and then to pay off this. So they give you this kind of setup. That's the entertaining part. And like it gives you enough like heist parody kind of jokes. And then the reveal at the minute is that the guy who's there to steal it doesn't know how to drive stick. So so set up and get tension. But all along, you want that reveal to be either a huge release of tension. So like that's the like heist one. So it's tension action movie, and then music stops, and he just kind of goes. You can't get it to go. So yeah, that first minute is either there to kind of set a false tone. So Matt Foley. So the Chris Farley sketch, it's a false tone of, we found, weed under your bed, and like it's a parent trying to get through to a kid who's just a problem kid, and we just don't know how to do any way to get through. So we brought along somebody, and so set a false tone and then break that tone with Chris Farley walking in, pulling on his pants.
Scared Straight kind of.
Yeah. And Scared Straight, the sketches that they do now is the same kind of thing. But the sketch wouldn't work without that first minute. And the contrast has to be super clear. Like this is what
you're establishing a baseline into a world
that
everybody can get used to before you just turn it upside down, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
And average length of the sketch, front to back?
I think like sweet spot is like 5 to 6, I think. But some of the ones they do for like songs and stuff will be like 3-minute songs, because that's typically the length of a song. The escalation part is always the like, that's fun and games. That's part of it. So it's short so that it can just be a straight line up at the end and with a dot. So it's not like as agonizing as a typical, like 3-act where you're having to go like, oh, this is the whole, but it's one scene that tries to encapsulate something.
How does that sketch world map onto what you do on the Wade Show?
Yeah.
Like how long is the average Wade show?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a comparison between, say, a sketch like that and what you do go into camera with your reads?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the length.
Good question,
Congratulations,
I've gathered that.
that was good.
I just asked the right questions on that stuff. You know what I mean?
No, yeah.
So length, yeah. I mean, I guess it is typically 4 to 6 minutes. That's kind of my typical length.
Yeah.
Rattling around in here.
No, keep going. Sorry, Wade. Keep going.
Leave that in post. That has to. Yeah,
it was 1 minute in. I waited.
That was great.
And I changed it up.
Jarring.
Elliot should have just the shot of just what? That's good.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely like I try to do a little intro paragraph, but the trouble is like when you're making TV comedy, you have the audience a little bit more grace with the audience, so you can take a minute to do setup. But if you're doing internet comedy, that's some of the trouble is like it has to be interesting right away, and but you can't give away the premise right away because that just destroys the structure of what you're trying to do. But sometimes like some sketches will be like the Ryan Long sketches that he does, where he'll do like hey, I'm a woke person and I'm a racist and we basically agree on everything, or we disagree on everything, and then they fight and realize that they agree on everything. So there's a like just state the premise, get going. But like a storyline sketch where so mine does have an intro, and it kind of introduces my take on the thing. So like I do a little bring up the topic. This is the world in which this topic exists, and then here's my most recent one was about like, and the Democrats. Here's what all the Democrat foot soldiers are doing. They're burning down Tesla dealerships, and they're doing all this other stuff. And the Democrat machine is trying to learn, right? So okay, so trying to learn becomes the theme. So here's all the ways that they're trying to skip through. So, and then it's more difficult when you're trying to like make an argument to do the escalation thing. So, I don't know what it would be like.
You killed the Constitution once.
I did kill the Constitution. Yeah. So you can escalate within a thing.
Was that one like? Is that more of the latter that you were just talking about, of like an idea where you just have to, like, is that one that the premise is right at the beginning, or is that one you're building to, or storyline wise, or?
I wish I could remember how I introed that one. Oh, I introed that one with death. So I was like, let's talk about the concept of death, nice. And then I just made a few jokes about that. Yep. But specifically, I want to talk about the death of the Constitution or the constitutional order. And that's kind of cheating off of John Oliver does that, where he'll do like, today's top story is about I don't know, but it's like a word that's related to the thing that he's going to do, and he'll do a few jokes, but specifically I want to talk about this. So today is about sports, and then jokes about sports, but really I want to talk about sports betting, and then sports betting, we'll do a whole segment on that. But yeah, like that's always like way further on in the process. I try to impose structure on my notes. But typically, like when I find out stuff that is joke worthy, it's usually specific. So if I'm searching through a story and I go like, okay, this is not there. If it's just general points that I'm trying to make, or I'm working through like a Russell Kirk article that's like, or like an Edmund Burke thing when it's talking about when a society has and like gets real heady, then the jokes don't come quite as easily unless I take it from general to specific. So if I'm, the most recent thing I did was like, Gavin Newsom and Michelle Obama started a podcast. And so I go, okay, politician podcast. Great. I can make a list of what if this politician did a podcast, what would it be called? And so the concept introduces itself. I've got specificity, but if it's a general thing, again, it's like, I'm trying to prove a serious point, then usually the way to, do that is through like analogy. So it's sort of like and then you make a joke out of that.
Yeah. You're saying it's hard to like make jokes with Russell Kirk. Like,
it is difficult.
You're interacting with Russell Kirk and Edmund Burke.
News is easier to make jokes off of than Russell Kirk and Edmund Burke and like Sam Francis essays. And so you just have to like live in it for a little while, and then you'll find like analogies that.
So clearly you've talked a little bit about like the comedy side of things. Like you're interested in how, you're not just interested in like, I love SNL.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
The minute I hear SNL starts,
the saxophone music just gets me. Yeah.
Like you're interested in how it works and like what doesn't work and those kind of things. Where does the Edmund Burke, Russell Kirk, where does that side come from? I imagine in a lineup of sketch guys, not many of them are reading deep tracks from Russell Kirk.
Yeah, which is a shame.
Which is a shame. I
agree. Yeah, that Simon Rich. What are you doing? Why are you not reading?
Like, Kirk? Did you grow up listening to like radio?
I watched
radio or what?
My dad would watch Bill O'Reilly every night.
Wow.
So it was like Fox News on all the time. And Dennis Miller would come on there. One of my favorite, like I still love him as a comic. So Dennis Miller would go on Bill O'Reilly, and I thought that was always funny, or at least like entertaining that he would do that. But yeah, that's probably, so I grew up in that kind of house. In high school, I would watch the news. That was like right as, I was in high school right as like Obama was coming in. Okay. I think that was like when I started watching the news. So like 2009.
That's when I started watching the news.
Yeah.
That was just very funny.
It was like,
remember when you started watching the news?
It was like, I would keep up with it regularly.
Yeah. No, it's great.
But anyway, so I'd watch that all the time and then kept up with it. And then, I wasn't like a political nerd or whatever. I was just like, I'm getting to the point where I'm a teenager. I feel like I should know what's going on the planet outside.
Early onset adulthood.
Yeah. Well, I got the like catheter ads way earlier than most. I was not Fox News's typical.
You're like, ads don't really work on me. It just turns
out right.
You've just been watching Fox.
Right, exactly. Yeah. All the reverse mortgage stuff. I'm like, I don't know what a regular mortgage is, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was at least interested in it, and then like I was interested in comedy, had political thoughts, and then got hired at the Crowder Show. So like the idea of doing political comedy wasn't the thing that I was excited about. Like just
striving for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the stuff that I like is the kind of just straight comedy. So like my favorite stuff is Simpsons and Seinfeld, and like those are not political shows who have like a bone to pick with the Enlightenment. Yeah. But yeah, like that. So it's kind of just a confluence of my interests. But I don't know. And as those things have grown, my hope is that like this format is something that isn't easy to duplicate, because it is like why I wanted to call it the Wade Show with Wade. Like one reason is it's I wanted to be able to put my name on it. I wanted to be like have to be proud of it. But I also wanted it to be like, this is my thing, like, and not do it in a way that is the standard like conservative podcast, or like play a clip and I just come up with a reaction and just kind of blabber for a little while. And again, there are people who are very good at that. But
I'm wondering when you think about it. I mean, you mentioned, I forget, Justin Long is what you said did the like I'm a woke person.
Ryan Long, yeah.
Ryan Long.
Justin Long is the I'm a Mac, I'm a PC guy.
Yes.
But
wrong guy.
Yeah, we can talk about him.
But just conservative comedy oftentimes comes off like conservative fiction.
Okay.
Where it's like I'm leading with like a conclusion.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna like put fiction pieces around it.
Mm-hmm.
I know comedy comes off the same way.
Yeah.
And two, what I've noticed about conservative comedy is it often will talk about itself self-referentially as like really courageous. And like, this is how we speak to, this is me taking it to the man, is like comedy. That's how comedy works.
Right. Well, the first is like Ryan Long's great. Ryan started as a comic and did sketches after that. So he like does political commentary sketches. There are others that I know.
That was not a Ricochet shot. But
No.
Like,
I know what you mean. There's a version of it that's just like seeing. I have this ideology, right? And then I want to communicate that in the most effective way possible. Somebody comes along and tells me comedy is a very effective way of changing people's minds. And so they just kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'll do that then. In a similar way to like somebody says, hey, you're an evangelist. And it's like, how do you get to people? Then you like tell stories, or you write a novel or whatever. And that just doesn't, like, it may be good, but you'd have to basically learn a new craft. Yeah. Like you have to start over, and you can't just go like, well, I'm funny in a room and I guess we can make this work in a similar way. So it's like seeing it as a craft and going like, well, this is another skill set. People don't typically, everybody thinks they're funny. Everybody thinks they're like, they can tell a story, or they like, one day I'll sit down and write my novel. And so it's odd to have but everybody thinks the same way about like broadcasting and podcasting. I think about that. I was in Texas a couple weeks ago and listening to Glenn Beck doing his show. And it's like, that guy's a broadcaster. Like that guy knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to work to a break, but also never let the audience think that he's like wrapping up to get to a break. There's all this like habit stuff that he's just done. Craft. Like that guy, he knows what he's doing.
Which he has to be good at before he can talk about whatever else he wants.
Exactly, like the topic itself. Yeah. And also like if somebody listens to that and they goes, well, I could do that. I talk. And people listen to me when I talk. It's like, no, he's done something and he's done work there. And I'm a ham and egger when it comes to like comedy writing, but it really is something that I've like gotten obsessed over, but it's fun.
So is that like, I'd like to be interested in the comedy breakdown. Like, you saying, what's the place for somebody that's just funny versus you're saying, is there a craft? Like you actually need to work on structuring this kind of comedy.
It's just writing. It's the difference between like written comedy, not written comedy. So like if you want to write, then that's great. And if you want to do stand up, then there are people who are funny stand-ups who, like the current thing right now is like crowd work comedy for stand-ups. And that's different from great for socials. But at a certain point, like if you're an old school comic who has a written routine and like sits there and goes like, oh no, not that word, this word, and I'll do that, and works through it, Jerry Seinfeld style, and just obsesses over that word before that one really makes it work. Then you might be frustrated with the like crowd work comics, because it's just like everybody kind of has to do crowd work. It used to be the part of the job that everybody just like, well, that's what you got to do. But yeah, those are just different styles. So it's like that guy can be funny in getting a crowd on his side and all that kind of stuff, which is a different skill set than writing, or like preparing stuff. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe on the craft thing,
Yeah.
this is just like circling back, but you were mentioning when what you're writing, it's harder to do the escalation when I think when you said you have an argument,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing the SNL and there's not as much of an argument, but so it's just escalation. So can you just talk about the difference? Like first, what is escalation and why is it easier to do without the argument?
Right.
And because I'm from my layman's approach here, I'm thinking about like when I've watched you, I think I get what you're saying. It's not after you bring in the point.
Yeah.
You don't exactly just kind of keep beating the dead horse in a funnier way, maybe like the way SNL would do. Like you're actually popping different jokes and almost like having sub points in what you're saying.
Right.
So can you explain what is escalation and why is it harder to do when you have an argument?
That's a great. I should have explained earlier about what escalation
Another good
is.
question, Jared.
But yeah, so I just, as he asked questions, I realized that I left total holes in what I was saying earlier, which is a good question. So
Craft.
It's when an
is
amateur in all fields is present, you get to help with filling the holes.
So like the escalation thing would be if you're watching, I keep bringing up Matt Foley, the Chris Farley sketches, but those are like all time. Everybody loves those sketches. So like if you are escalating, then you bring him in and all he's doing is just talking loud at so-and-so. And all you need is a little bit of funny mannerisms of him being like, oh, he's not going to be a typical buttoned up motivational speaker. Got it. That's our premise. State the premise or like show the premise. That's what's going on. And then from there, it has to become increasingly clear that he's actually just a desperate loser who somehow got this job. Like, and so that unraveling of it becoming, oh, this is really about him. And like, you're going to, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're going to end up exactly like me. But like, so you save that. So you work all the way up and you slowly realize like, oh, and he's living in the van down by the river. And that's why he's saying, I don't want you to live there. So the escalation is take it like, start with the premise and then play with the premise. So if imagine you're writing it, you start with the premise, you play with the premise and go like, oh, and he could do this and he could fall over on the table and get this, do that and the other thing. And then basically what you want to do is list out all the riffs that you had on the premise into like escalating order. So from most calm Chris Farley all the way up to like he's running out the door, the table's broken, and everybody hugs and goes like, "Hi," like, and they all go like, "I love you, Dad. I love you too." Like he brings the family together, and that's the button on that one. But does that answer the escalation question? So
yeah,
it's
but
like,
what's a button?
So the button is just a joke at the end that feels like it wraps it up.
Okay.
So at the end of the Chris Farley motivational speaker sketches, the beginning of it, these two, the father and the son, they're on the outs. They don't like each other. And then, so he's bringing in this motivational speaker to like bring him to where he's embraces his dad and tries to act like a responsible young man. All the craziness happens. And then by the end, they all hug each other because that's the thing that brought them together was like protecting themselves from this crazy guy who they invited to their house. So that's, so structurally it's just like in my videos, the callback clip that I usually do, that functions like a button. And it's usually a word play or
so today or yesterday's,
yeah,
you were making fun of
Tim Walz,
Tim Walz,
right?
Who recently said that he could kick most of their ass.
Yeah, he was like, when it comes to Trump supporters, I think I could kick most of their ass.
This How do you fight it? This notion
I think
of
I could kick most of their ass.
Which is, and it's like I saw that and I was like, there's some way to play with like how poor that grammar is.
That was something earlier in the video, and then you finished it with what?
Yeah, I finished it with him saying, as it stands, Trump keeps delivering wins. His approval rating keeps going up, while the Democrats are just talking out of
most of their ass.
Button.
Yeah. So that's the principle on button, and then escalation. Why escalation's hard in an argument is that you don't really get to pick. So if I'm writing something that's just, okay, Chris Farley comes in, he starts acting a little crazy. And then by the end, he's full insane, falling all over the place, yelling. I can put those in ascending order. But if I'm making an argument and I've just written a bunch of jokes, I can't put those in ascending order in the same way. So that it's like,
because you actually have plotted points
right,
that you need to complete.
Yeah. So if I'm trying to go like this, therefore that, then I can't take the joke from the therefore and put it at the top, even if it's not as funny as like, oh, my funniest joke is first. That's not ideal for comedy, but it's the only way for me to go like A, B, therefore C.
Give us an example in one of your recent ones. Just the arguments you had to put in there.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole section in this most recent one. Elliot is in here, and we were editing it, and a big section of it, I was like, there are no jokes here, because it was just me, a bunch of points I wanted to make, and it felt dry to me. I was like, oh, there's nothing really here, but I was like, but I need to make the point, and it feels like a necessary evil to like make an argument. But that was the section where I was saying that the Democrats are looking for personality. They don't have personality right now because they don't have a leader, and their whole existence is dependent on not having a leader. So if you have a leader, then they might come in, break the system in some way with their own priorities or something. And so I was like, I probably could have found an analogy or something in there, but if that analogy is not, if it's not gradually getting like crazier, then that's just different from sketch. So like, yeah, my jokes are dependent on where something has to fit in the argument, but that's usually why I try to make those ending things a callback, because callbacks give you automatic audience points somehow. I don't understand the math of that, but if somebody has seen something and you're bringing it back around, then it makes people feel like, wow, this guy it was all leading to this. Wow. So that's typically that. And I hope that doesn't sound too manipulative. Sorry, audience. But yeah, like the callbacks, people like those, even if sometimes they don't make sense.
Yeah, we're all just sense. Reevaluating our favorite comedians.
Oh no, it's like that's the way it's like introduction and conclusions. I mean, they kind of they kind of encourage you to do the same thing.
Surprising and inevitable, right? Like
surprise. That's exactly right.
Tree of life in the garden, Genesis, tree of life at the end of the book. Yeah. You know, it's like there's something deep about the callback deal.
Yeah, well, what I said was like Aristotle talked about an ending needs to be surprising yet inevitable. So, and if you can feel, if it's just surprising and like a shock out of nowhere, what is that? That stinks. But if it's just inevitable and it's like, well, why did I bother?
I went,
but it has to be both of those things.
Yesterday, I had to take a bath after the AI discussion. And I went and read Frost.
Okay, yeah.
And he says the same thing, like basically the poem has to set its course, but it must feel predestined. The end.
Yeah, right.
Has to be.
It's so true. Yeah.
And no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. Mm-hmm. Like just very much the same thing.
Yeah. Like, and I know that if there's a joke in the show, there are some things that make other people laugh that didn't make me laugh, but I was like, oh, that's funny, and I'll put that in. But if something made me laugh while I was writing it, then I go, that's okay. Yeah. I like that show more. And there would be some weeks where there would be one of those, and the rest of it's like, I thought that was funny, and I wrote it down, and people responded to all of them. But I've got my favorites in there, and I won't give my secrets away either.
How much? Could you speak just on like types of humor? Do you go through do you got like categories for us?
Yeah. I mean, there's like,
and figureheads would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Types of like, not types of delivery of humor. So not like stand up versus sketch or versus that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I'm actually thinking like categories.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like there's observational. So like Jerry Seinfeld is the obvious example. And then there's, like character comedy. And usually if you can blend types of comedy, that's when it becomes really interesting. So, and then there's like shock comedy that's typical with like stand-ups or some sketch. So some sketch will have like, there's the old 70s Saturday Night Live sketch where it's a Julia Child sketch and she like cuts her finger and just like bleeds out on TV. And so that's just pure shock. And and all those things can take place in sketch. So character is most comedy that you see on TV is character comedy, and characters, you laugh at characters when they act like themselves. So Everybody Loves Raymond. So like
now we're talking about the hits.
This situation is happening, and then all of a sudden Marie walks in and you go, I know exactly how she is picturing all this because I've like, oh, now she's involved. Or
Mother-in-law walks in,
Mother-in-law walks in, yeah. Or like Brad Garrett's character,
which I know is Maria, but I was just filling that.
Yeah,
in.
yeah. Sorry, if you guys are not, everybody loves Raymond heads. Yeah, the mother-in-law walks in. So a bunch of stuff like that. So like character comedy. A really interesting time is when something blends. So like the George Washington sketch on Saturday Night Live with Nate Bargatze. Did you see this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's an example
let's
of
do this one.
Now he's in.
That's
Now
very
he's
funny.
in.
I love this
Okay,
one.
I should have said this one earlier, but this is an example of like observational comedy mixed with character. So it's basically just like the writing of that sketch is, hey, you ever notice how like we only have a word for dozen, but not another number, or like a number for 12 or whatever, and that's kind of not really a joke, but it's like an interesting like, oh, maybe, or like, hey, we do this weird thing and there's no punchline, but it's just a bunch of observations about weird stuff we do with numbers and words and
Drive on parkways.
yes, that kind
And
of thing.
park on driveways.
Yeah. That reminds me of another sketch that I was going to bring up, but I'll tell about later. But so like that one blends character. So you tell a story of this George Washington character. He's totally committed to this and everybody else is a little skeptical. So you just dramatize observations. And you can start with an observation and turn into a sketch. So anyway, so that happens in comedy though. So like, it's hard to really say, oh, what was that one? Oh, that was character, because you've got a guy who's like totally committed to this vision, no matter what is going on around him. But you've also got a bunch of funny observations about, oh, I guess I never really thought about it. Yeah, dozen is the only word we have for a number.
I have a question about a category of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Each Christmas, as the McAtees will watch Christmas Vacation
Mm-hmm.
with filters, of course.
Yes, right.
Like can people do physical comedy today? Like, is that just something we don't do? Like name babies Gary, or like
Yeah,
that's
right.
a thing we used to do. We
Uh-huh.
used to see a baby and say, "This is Gary."
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you'll ever see it again. Gary DeMar is probably the
Yeah.
last one.
Mm-hmm.
But is physical comedy like equally
Baby
like,
Gary.
oh, that's something we used to do?
That's the baby Gary of entertainment.
Yeah, we used to do that, and it is funny when I watch that.
Right.
But I don't see a lot of people being like,
Yeah.
doing it anymore.
It's I don't know if that's true, but maybe it is. But like it's eternal. I mean, like my favorite, one of my favorite comedy movies is Buster Keaton's The General. So it's
Okay.
like silent comedy.
So he went even way further back than I did.
Like no, like
Yeah, Jake, I don't know if that thing from the 80s is true, but back when
What-
Buster Keaton was doing
what I'm saying, yeah, like what I'm saying is that like still works
Yeah.
at every level. It doesn't age.
it plays.
And like some of the and there are some things that like character comedy is another thing that like, oh, I can track with that. Like reading Woodhouse now, that doesn't age poorly at all. There's some things that really do age poorly. I don't know why, but like Looney Tunes and Buster Keaton are working on the same level. But there are some jokes, like if you watch an old vaudeville show, maybe it would have half the jokes you'd get, or like would say, like, oh, nobody would say it that way now. But physical comedy does not age like that. And character comedy doesn't age like that because people are people. And so like you can laugh at a Shakespeare play or you can laugh at a Woodhouse. And those just function really well because nothing fundamental changed. But what shocks people, that does change.
Sure.
And so if physical comedy's fallen out of favor, it's not because it's suddenly
work.
gotten funny. And it may just be that people undervalue. I don't know why somebody would undervalue it. Maybe it's because it's like cruel. So like if you like people think of it as like, oh, that guy, I don't want to hurt that guy or whatever, people falling down.
Maybe I'm
know.
not thinking of one, but I can't think of maybe like a recent.
Yeah. The big comedy now, we have more access to stand up than we ever have because of online clips and stuff. So like stand up in the past was it was 5 minutes on Johnny Carson and then I'll go see him on the weekend. So every comic had to have at least 5 clean minutes and that he could do. And everybody was working on that 5 minutes being the best 5 minutes that they had. So everybody kind of had to work clean, at least at the top, at least when they were, if they just wanted to be a road comic, that's fine.
Yep.
But if they wanted to get on Johnny Carson and become the biggest thing in the world, 5 minutes of clean. Yeah. Get a show. It's 5 minutes of clean. And so like stand up now, is not that, because you just get access, like you can have a platform without having anything clean.
Yeah.
And so like that's one element of like how comedy's changed now. And so like when people do clean comedy, it's the exception, whereas it didn't used to be. And so people got around TV stuff before, like it wasn't like squeaky clean or perfect, but like that's why Nate Bargatze shoots up, and sometimes like regardless of the medium. So you can access the dirtiest, filthiest Netflix. You can access Jim Norton's Netflix special, and you can access Nate Bargatze, Dusty Slay, these guys who work clean, and those are actually getting more exposure, more success, because they're just talented people, and it takes work. But yeah, I don't know if, I think some comedy does age poorly, but I don't think, the physical comedy question is interesting. I don't know what, like, I'm sure there are reels that are just like pure physical, but I don't know for sure.
Instagram reels.
Yeah, Instagram reels. Yeah.
So Nate's a recent guy. I mean, I've watched some of the stuff. Let's like just exegete him. I don't know how much time we have, but let's exegete him for just a moment. Like, what makes him funny? Why is he so good?
A couple of different ways to go about that. So he is, he's a guy who's like primarily influenced by clean comedy. Some people will like work clean, but that's not their like natural gear. But when you ask him what he watched growing up, it's Andy Griffith Show, Dick Van Dyke Show. And those very, very funny shows don't get the comedy props that they should have because they're clean. And like I'm an enormous Carl Reiner fan, the guy who created the Dick Van Dyke Show. And once he went from TV to movies, he like started doing like R-rated comedies. But the PG, like the TV clean thing actually kept him from, he was as funny as he's ever was and kept good guardrails on him. So he was actually funnier on TV than he was in movies. But yeah, so Nate, back to him, grew up watching those things. He didn't grow up with a lot of money, but like his parents at one point saved up so that he could go watch Jerry Seinfeld. So like, clean stand up, those are like influences that he has. And he's a huge Seinfeld fan. You can hear him just bring that up on his podcast. He'll just, always launch into those. But like, as far as the actual like substance of what he does, it's observational comedy, and it's storytelling. And it's mostly him as a character. So he functions as this guy who has a point of view. He's sort of like realizing about himself, like how base a lot of the things he does is, like so ordering DoorDash in the middle of the night and all that kind of stuff. So like, or just going like, oh, I would be a really bad time traveler because I don't know, like if people go like, and who's the president after this? And oh, I'm sorry, I don't know. Or like him just playing the dumb guy character. It's like, yeah. And so what he does, that's what he does. And then how he does it, he came up in the New York stand-up scene, which was around the time like Hannibal Buress, another guy was coming up, Giannis Papas. So guys who have like other stand-up careers that didn't end up being like, that aren't Nate Bargatze stand-up careers. So he didn't go around doing like church shows, or he didn't go around doing the clean comedy hour. He had to just like be on stage next, and he didn't want anybody to go like, oh, huge quality dip when that guy got up, and so that they wouldn't notice that he's clean. Like I never didn't notice that Brian Regan was clean until people were like, oh, he's clean. I was like, oh yeah, I guess he is. You could show his entire special with no bleeps. Like, wow, cool. But yeah, that's Nate's particular thing. And Brian Regan, similar, observational, but he's also a character, right? So he plays, I was the dumb guy kid. That's another thing, like the point of view is huge there, but also like, Norm Macdonald talked about how, comics who, do like the modern late night guys, they always want to make sure that that you know that they're smarter than you are. So like the audience, they needs to know I'm smarter than you. Or even stand-ups do this, where they'll be like morally superior or intellectually superior, argue with the audience, like talk down in that way. And he said like, nobody wants to think that they're stupid. So like, why would somebody go to a comedy show and like want to feel stupid? So like play dumb is always the move. And typically, like, so Norm was an extremely intelligent guy, but always played dumb. Guy who just couldn't get a hold of what was going on. You're like, I don't understand this. So it was never condescending for him. So similar with Nate,
That's good.
I'd say.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, can I ask about Norm Macdonald? You mentioned him just
Yeah.
now. He seems to post, this isn't crazy, but post death, really a meteoric rise. Like he was a star, of course. And especially thinking back on it now, everybody's like, of course.
Right.
But he does seem to me, and I was never a big Norm guy, or I knew of him, and I don't know. But back then, it does seem like he was sort of almost an inconvenient person to have around, or like he didn't seem like he was a guy getting all of the invites to all the comedy podcasts that were on the rise when they could have definitely had him on.
Absolutely.
He dies, and then everybody's just like, wait a second, was that guy the greatest person on earth?
Well, Conan got in trouble when he got the Tonight Show. They moved him from 12:30 at night to 11:30. And his fourth guest was Norm Macdonald, and NBC like hated that because they were like, he's not Tom Hanks, right? He's not this huge star. And he was like, yeah, but we always have a good time.
Yeah.
And so like Norm, people got in trouble, like Conan O'Brien got in trouble for having Norm Macdonald on in 2009. And then, after he dies, the canon's closed. I think that's part of it, where it's like, you can always, in a similar way to like when Seinfeld ends, now Seinfeld is a thing that existed. And so I can reference Seinfeld as a thing, but I think that is typically what happens with stuff.
So is it just that phenomenon, or was like, did he have edges that were like inconvenient?
There's total like Tombs of the Prophets stuff that happens with him. Cause like he's not a guy who you would want addressing stuff. Cause like his take on like Trump humor is something that would just like, he did a Canadian television interview about like how Trump humor doesn't make sense to him because Trump is typically being funny. And so he's doing self-parody. And so if you're trying to parody self-parody, then you just look like an idiot.
So if comedians are trying to parody
Trump, then they're parodying a guy doing self-parody, and that doesn't make any sense. So it's like critiquing them on a comedy level, not just going like, you libs. Like he's just going like, the form doesn't work. You're not doing a good job. But having that guy around and bringing him into the parties, he would make those points. And he would like just show, hey, you're at a craft level, like not cutting it. And it's because you're like, you have an axe to grind or something. But he always saw himself as just like, I'm just a nightclub comic. I'm not, don't take me seriously. But yeah, it's definitely a guy that you wouldn't, I don't know. There's a reason that they stopped having him host shows. So like he hosted the ESPN ESPYs in like the 90s and just got in so much trouble. Like everybody, the organizers, like the athletes were extremely uncomfortable. And then he just didn't get invited back. Same with like why he got fired from SNL. It was the Don Ohlmeyer, the president of NBC.
What you do? Do you know about that? Are you familiar with Norm at all?
Yes.
Fellow Norm?
Yeah, I know this guy.
Okay. Yeah. So he got fired from SNL because he was making fun of OJ, and they wanted to fire Jim Downey, and Norm was like, no. You fire him, you're firing me. We're going out. But like, a guy who just wouldn't stop making OJ jokes, no matter how much the president of NBC has him sit down and go like, you're not doing this anymore. And he goes, well, thank you very much. And just leaves. So yeah, like, but that's like comedy. That's a comic. But back to your earlier point about like, hey, we're doing this important thing, comedy.
Yeah.
So like the conservative comedy, that's the worst kind of conservative comedy. And it's the worst kind of liberal comedy. So if you're watching a leftist who thinks he's doing something important, that's the worst. Like it's like comedy, you can say comedy is important and like a theoretical thing, but you shouldn't be self-important while you're doing it. Because that just makes you shrill. It makes you like, and it takes away all your talent. Like if you have any talent, it just masks that because you're sitting there going like, well, I'm a modern day philosopher. Then like if you're being self-important about it, then yeah, you're the smartest guy in the room. The audience isn't going to be comfortable with you. You're just going to come off as like idiot, who's like, yeah. So comedy is important, but it should never be self-important because then it just takes itself away, takes away all the joy out of it.
It's good. Jared?
It's great. No, man, I think this has been really good. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Wade Show.
Thank you. Go watch The Wade Show. You can subscribe to his YouTube. You can also use Wade99.
Wade99, CanonPlus.com, Wade99.
Subscribe to Canon Plus.
Wadecast is an exclusive to Canon Plus, so
Yes.
check out my
That is
recent.
the real Wade backstage. So we shouldn't say this is it.
Okay.
You have to pay to get that.
This
Oh,
is that's all right. It's a backstage interview though.
Yes.
You guys just pulled me out of the Wade Show bunker, and here I am.
Thank you, Wade.
There you go.
Happy to be here.